The bliss of the abyss, it's here now.
Hello. Welcome back to the Bliss of the Abyss. My name is Robert Neumark Jones, and you are listening to this podcast. Created by me, presented by me, produced by me, and sometimes Nils Anistia, to be fair. How are you all? How's everything going? Have you got your Christmas stuff sorted yet? Have you been enjoying Hanukkah? Have you had a nice Festivus? Me, myself, and I haven't got any of my presents sorted at all. Completely behind schedule. And I'm flying to New York on Friday. I'm going to probably be able to bring my microphone with me, although space is a bit tight. But hopefully I can and record something for you when I'm over there. I'm going to be there for Christmas and New Year. So that's quite exciting. Haven't been to New York for over a year now. I was last there in October, as you may know. And apparently there's going to be a white Christmas. So that should be fun. What might be slightly less fun is I am going to have to spend some time with some MAGA peeps. Now, I'm okay at holding my tongue. I'm okay at it, but I'm not the best. And if it gets a little bit tense, let's just say I might hold off on the whiskey. Whiskey makes you slippery. I don't want to be too gin-teresting this year. So, I'll let you know how it goes. I fear for the worst, but I pray for the best. What else is new? I've been recording this voiceover for a Danish bank. Caitlin got her contract, which is great news. I've been fixing up my mum's cottage annex thingy, which is fun, using the circular saw. I had this revelation where I was using the circular saw. Ooh, that tickles my lips. And I went down to the hardware store and they had this big, big wall mill. You put on a big slab of wood, roll it into place. You get the massive saw, you turn it on, you go, and just slice it through. And I just thought, if I could just do that all day, I'd be happy, I think. Unfortunately, I'd imagine if I did work there, they wouldn't let you just work the mill. I yearn for the mill. I'd imagine I'd get, roped into other jobs. Can I just work the mill? I'll do it night and day. I imagine they'd be like, well, you're needed on aisle 3 and similar such. But, I don't think working in the mill is in my future, but it is in my past. Anyway, I'll stop waffling. On the show today, we have Judge Mentalist. A little bit about Judge Mentalist. He's a world touring comedy hypnotist who's performed in the US, beyond, festivals, theatres, raising money for all kinds of good causes, and was recently at the Barcelona Fringe Festival. And in this episode, we really get into it and talk about, some really interesting stuff. He's quite a thoughtful chap, and as you'll hear, he has no problem in talking. So I didn't have to ask too many questions, which is always nice. It meant we just rolled, we just went with it. But we got into some really interesting discussions. This is my, I think, second hypnotist I've had on the show, so I'm clearly getting weird. But if you listen, I think there's something in this for everyone. It's especially really interesting part, but we talk about why is it that people can be hypnotized. It just kind of came to me in the moment. I think it's a bit of an interesting question. I think the answers that we come across in the course of our discussion actually make for a very interesting chat. Anyway, if you want to learn more about Judge Mentalist, go to judgementalist.com. I'll put my links in the show notes. And without any further ado, it is my privilege, honour and pleasure to introduce you to me and Judge Mentalist. Judge Mentalist, very, very welcome to the Bliss of the Abyss. You reached out to me, having listened to the Albert Bramante episode.
Yeah.
I was immediately taken with what you said because you've got so many interesting things. that I want to talk to you about. I myself am interested in comedy and hypnotism, and you bridge that divide. So I'm really interested to hear about that and to hear about your amazing touring. I know you've been to Jamaica recently, you've been to Barcelona recently, so I want to hear about all those stories. But before that, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience a bit? Tell us a bit about who you are.
Yeah, so well, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to having a fun chat here and just kind of who knows where we go, and I'm happy with that, which is kind of the story to much of the performances that I do on stage. But I am a touring, performing stage hypnotist, comedy hypnotist. Those words tend to be kind of thrown around interchangeably. Some people love calling themselves hypnotists. Some people abhor the word and say, nope, you're a comedy hypnotist or whatever. I'm an entertainer. I'm not super worried about what the label is,
Mm,
unless there's a specific reason to be concerned with it. And usually there's not. So I do shows that are highly interactive, and sometimes I will do them for tiny little groups of like 20 or 30 people, big auditoriums full of people, everywhere in between, public shows, private shows, ticketed fundraiser type of shows are some of my favorites to do. I'd say those make up more than half of the shows that I do here in the States, where we link up with a school group or a nonprofit, and the show is a fundraiser event. Or, as you mentioned, I was recently in Barcelona, taking part in their second annual Fringe Festival. And that was a ton of fun. I love Barcelona. I had never been there before
beautiful city.
and can't wait to go back for so many reasons, and not the least of which being to perform. Two of the venues that I performed in four total venues. Two of them were little comedy clubs, which are not exactly perfect for my show and how it runs. Shows went well. Well, one of them was a hypnosis show in a comedy club, and then I was part of a variety show with a bunch of magicians and mentalists, and I did a mentalism routine in that. Um, Great venue for what we were doing. Not perfect if I were doing a full blown hypnosis show. And then two of the shows I did were in smaller but intimate theater type of setup with an actual full-blown stage, and both of those venues are looking forward to having me return sometime,
Right.
which kind of has me itching to get back. But then also, hey, if I'm gonna spend all the money to traverse the Atlantic Ocean,
Yeah.
it's time to open up the book and network throughout Europe, because one of the things that I learned in this journey, because I didn't just fly into Barcelona and fly out, is I've been to Europe a couple times, but this is the first time I really absorbed it, spent a longer period of time there, and realized that, hey, there are many fantastic and affordable ways to move throughout Europe
Mm,
and the UK that aren't as prevalent here in the States. So the prospects of saying, hey, let's put together a 3-week tour in X number of different countries is actually reasonable.
mm,
The big hurdle is the Atlantic Ocean and the cost to get transatlantic, because once I'm there, hey, let's party on. So we've got some stuff that might happen in March, it might happen in May. It's a lot of juggling, because you've got different venues and different schedules, and some of them want to book way far out and some of them don't want to book way far out, and it's a mess that my team deals with in trying to
yeah.
juggle this. And the one thing that we know is, hey, we have to decide on a block of time, and that's the time that you're going to be in Europe. And if somebody can fit into that block, great. If not, then I'm highly likely, schedule permitting, to return for the 2026 Barcelona Fringe Fest. So if they don't get me in the spring, then maybe they'll have a spot next fall when I come back for that. So yeah, tons of fun. And we can talk about whatever element of it that you want. But yeah, for anybody who doesn't know, the shows are highly interactive. The makeup of the show is basically, to give you kind of the too long didn't read version of it, is
Hmm.
I get a handful of people from the audience. These folks are volunteers, so I'm not picking them. They're choosing themselves. They join me up on stage. I put them into a hypnotic trance, and then we do fun stuff, silly stuff, nothing embarrassing. I want to keep doing this. So if you embarrass people,
Yeah, you
word
get
gets
bad
out. Yeah. And I'm very clear about that you are going to come up here, you're going to have a great time. For most people, and I will say that everybody experiences it a little bit differently, but most people leave that stage with a lot more energy than they went onto that stage. They feel like in literally 45 minutes to an hour's time,
Hmm.
they feel like they just woke up from taking the best power nap of their lives.
Hmm.
And they generally remember most of what happened on stage, which is kind of a weird thing because from that audience member's perspective, if I were to describe what they are experiencing on stage in a very generalistic sort of way,
Hmm.
like you've got 30 seconds on an elevator to describe their experience. It's that they are hallucinating to whatever story or journey that I am taking them on. So for the people that are on stage, when I tell you that you are an astronaut in a rocket ship, or you are a guitar player in a rock band, or a superhero, or whatever it is, the audience just sees people reacting to whatever's going on, putting a space helmet on, buckling themselves in, playing an air guitar, whatever it might be. To them, they're there.
Hmm.
They are in whatever picture they have painted for themselves, which is such a beautiful thing when you think about it. Because if I've got 6 or 8 people that are up on stage, there are 6 or 8 completely different stories that are being told in that moment, all at the same time, because each and every one of those people's perception and what, when I say you're on a boat, what that means to each of those people is something different. And what they're seeing, what they're experiencing, things that they might hear, whether they're happening or not, because they're in this kind of my mind, and the suggestions that are coming into my mind are allowing me to paint this sometimes very vivid picture. I mean, I've had people describe to me that you said this, and then I was instantly running through this field, and I had this thing that I recognized, and I felt like I was carrying around this object that my grandfather used to have when I was a little kid. So they're drawing off of, and to them, it's very, very real in the moment. And of course, there are no actual props on stage. There is nothing that they're tangibly holding. So when they have a memory of being on stage and holding this item from their childhood,
Yeah.
it's not actually happening. But to them, it happened. And in their memory, they remember that happening. And it's such a empowering kind of experience to really be able to, in whatever format it is, take a handful of people on what is entertaining to the audience sitting there while they do silly things on stage, but to them they're going on this like unique, personal, like dream type journey
Hmm.
to who knows where. I mean, I've taken people from being astronauts on that rocket ship to landing on some new planet that nobody's ever been on. And like, so I record all these shows,
Hmm.
and they're available for audience members or really whoever else, because they're on a public website to purchase afterwards. Um, some of the ones where I've taken people up to this imaginary planet, and there's just this moment where I tell them to get up, get out of the capsule, walk around. You can see them like reaching out, grabbing and holding different plants and petting animals and all sorts of, who knows what's going on in their mind. You know, I'm painting this picture, but I don't know what's on the brush.
Mm,
They're dipping that brush, or I'm dipping that brush for them into a paint can that is filled with their imagination. And I
mm,
don't know what that paint looks like. They know what that paint looks like. And I get to see them reacting to what they're envisioning as this is all happening, and obviously see it after the fact on, the video, because sometimes when I'm on stage, I'm watching 6 different things at any given time,
mm,
including the people that I have on stage, and making sure that they're safe, and if I'm on a platform that's elevated so that they're not getting near the edge of that stage and
mm.
doing a swan dive into an audience or whatever it might be, and just making sure that they don't have any sort of you know weird reactions, which is super, super rare, but sometimes can happen, to make sure and handle that if it needs to be handled, which is, if it happens 1 in 100,000 times, it's a high number for it, something weird to happen or
Mm.
a weird reaction. But yeah, I mean, all in all, it's a ton of fun, and it's a really, it opens the door to a creative space to take people, like I said, on a very, very unique journey.
Yeah, and you're sort of laying down the main beats of the story, so they've got the arc from you, but however, whichever palette they choose, whatever memories that evokes or sideways trajectories it sparks in their mind is kind of organic and, like you said, different for each individual person. And I suppose with that, you have the potential for them to go any number of places. I mean, you mentioned sort of weird reactions and how rare they are. Um, I'm just curious, have there been sometimes a reaction, let's say you're, an astronaut, probably not an astronaut, but whatever the story is, you're painting a story and someone has an extreme emotional reaction that you weren't expecting, or something like that. Maybe it evokes a memory and they start crying or laughing hysterically. Has that ever happened? And if it does happen, what do you do in that situation?
So there's a couple of things that will manifest naturally with people in hypnosis, and laughter is definitely one of them. Now, I will often early on in a show begin with some routines, or near the beginning of the show begin with routines that are actually designed to elicit that emotion.
Mm,
And you can, and that's kind of part of it. And then it evolves into, now let's get a scary emotion and everything, because all of these types of things, there's a bunch of different phenomena that can be expressed, and drawn out of people through hypnosis. And again, this is in the entertainment setting. That there's a whole nother conversation to be had about the doors that can be opened in a kind of clinical or therapeutic setting, um, that is a whole nother, like I said, it's a whole nother tangent and a whole nother conversation. I mean, people have completely been able to reshape their lives through, mindset shifts that they've done in hypnosis. And a lot of people commonly will think of, smoking cessation or weight control, or those are some of the big rocks, but all sorts of stuff. I mean, there are folks like major athletes who use hypnotists to kind of correct their mindset on the court. Um, but one of the ones that really sticks out to me, an odd reaction, and nothing really negative of it, but I was doing a show a couple of years back at a county fair. So when you do shows in a setting like that, this is not everybody buys a ticket, goes to the theater, sits in their assigned seat or in their assigned section or whatever it is, and then the show starts and stops, and then you know, mill around and go home. At a county fair, this show exists as part of a much bigger thing.
Mm.
And there's a sign up there that says that we're going to do shows at 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock or whatever it is. And there's seating, and people just gather to the area if they're interested.
Yeah.
So it's outside, it's very, very fluid. There, you know, you get the show started, and a couple of people are like, this is not for me, and they walk away, and 6 more are like, ooh, what's going on over here? And they plop down in seats. I had a routine that I was doing in one of these shows a couple of years ago where I have people that are on stage and they're fishing, and then there's the fun thing about this is that it can become an improv show
Mm.
in and of itself and in the moment. Like, you could work off of hey, here are the routines that I'm going to work through. But once you're there and you're seeing people react to things and the way that they're responding to the suggestions and the stimulus, sometimes you offshoot and go in a different direction. I've had people that are doing this fishing routine, and then all of a sudden I'm suggesting, hey, you've got what feels like a big one. Pull it, pull it, pull it. Oh, it looks like you just have a boot on the end of there. Go ahead, throw that back, rebait your line, whatever it might be. And it just kind of creates this little offshoot, silly little antics that the audience is like, this person's really taking what looks like a boot and throwing it back in, and they're doing all this stuff because to them they're seeing a boot that's in their lap. You know,
Right.
there's nothing there, but the audience, but the audience sees them manipulating this and acting very much as if it's real, because to them in that moment it is. So that routine moves from them, and usually, again, this is all, there's kind of a wild card element to it of, hey, we're going to go down this path tonight, or we're going to go down that path tonight, or, oh, I've got a great group of people who are super deep in trance, so I'm going to become invisible for them. Not something that I do in every show, but if I've got the right people at the right point, I'm going to pull that out. It's all very, hey, do I have people that are in the right state to get there? Because there's kind of scales and almost like a depth to how entranced somebody is. And then also how creative they are, which is usually that natural creativity that somebody has is going to manifest through their actions and their responses in this show. So if I get a fantastic group of people, I'm taking that show in a different direction some nights. So a lot of times that routine, in this particular instance, that routine from you're fighting a huge fish that you're going to bring in, and then the music's going to change, and you realize that you're not fighting that fish. You now are that fish. You've got a hook in your cheek. Your arms are at your side because they're not arms anymore. They're fins, and you are wiggling. You are fighting to get away. And I had this gal in the middle of this routine, and she was like right in the middle of my line of volunteers, who gets up and runs off of the stage area where we're doing the show. And turns out this was not some sort of weird adverse reaction to what was going on. She was a fish trying to get not be lunch. She was legit, and I learned this afterwards, and I thought that, maybe she was overheating because we're outside. It's a county fair. It's over 100 degrees Fahrenheit at the time. So everybody's, sweating, and it's the middle of the day. So the sun's beating down on everybody. No, she's just a fish trying to not be lunch. And there's a very kind of baseline routine that a lot of hypnotists will do in their shows. And this is kind of an early on in the show routine to get people warmed up and see who you're working with, where you're in a setting where, you're on a beach or wherever they put them, and it's getting really, really hot, and you've got to fan yourself. And then all of a sudden it becomes really, really cold. So not knowing in the moment what's happening, which of course I learned afterwards, that's why she ran off, because I usually try to talk to most of the volunteers afterwards. I immediately throw into this impromptu cold routine because I'm like, is this lady overheating? Is she whatever? And I'm like, you literally, when people are in hypnosis, you can turn up the heat, you can turn down the heat, and they will get hot or they will get cold, as if what you are saying is actually happening. Because again, to them, it is very, very real. I could have people sitting on that stage or performance area, whatever the setup is, in 100-degree Fahrenheit weather, shivering, because I've given them the suggestion that it is incredibly cold. There is snow coming down. In fact, the snow is starting to set on the ground around your feet, and you are incredibly cold, and they will start to shiver on that stage, even though everything around them visually to somebody who's not in trance says, why is that person cold? It is over 100 degrees out here. The sun is baking down, and but that's the power of hypnosis.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's silly stuff. We have a ton of fun with it. I love it because I get to meet new people and see, it was a big challenge, and it was a ton of fun doing shows in Spain with an audience that most of them English was not their first language. I think everybody that was in any of my shows, or at least anybody that volunteered to come on stage, spoke English, and enough so that we made it all work.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting challenge, and it was probably one of the most fun things. And for anybody who's interested in seeing some of this, I've got a team that takes all of my show videos and creates these little clips and throws them on social media. So sometime within the next few weeks, the ones from Barcelona shows will start. Some of them have, but more and more of those are going to start to spring up. So having people that are reacting to things, clearly vocally reacting to things in their native language, which is not English, when the hypnotist is giving all these suggestions in English, because when you are in trance, when we have taken your conscious mind, the one that's judging ourselves all day, every day, and say, hey, buddy, you go over there and take a time out. I want to talk to the power center, your subconscious mind. It's almost like autopilot has clicked in. For anybody that's out there listening, you've experienced this. You may not realize that you've experienced this, but if you've ever been driving somewhere and, distance goes by, you get to your destination, and we've all done it, and you don't remember everything about getting where you were going, all the stops, all the turns and everything. Clearly, everything was fine. You got there all right. That kind of feeling of clicking into autopilot is a form of trance. It is very, very close to hypnosis. It's the same part of the mind that is operating. And so many other instances of when that happened. It's as simple as you walked into the room for something, and then you got there, and all of a sudden you're like, why did I come into this room? You did that while in some sort of quasi trance state, that when you popped out of that state, you totally forgot what the anchor was that pushed you into that room. Or if you're watching some sort of movie and it gets emotional, and then you get emotional while you're there watching this work of fiction that is just actors and actresses, but that tear in your eye says otherwise. It's because you've kind of dove into that world in that moment, and you are emotionally tied into it. And these are all just what we do. What I do when I do these shows is kind of elevate that state. And then instead of you watching some movie that's on TV, we're creating some other dream for you.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think what's really interesting to me about that is that when we find ourselves in those sort of trance states, a lot of the time it's not an intentional decision we've made. We almost catch ourselves afterwards being like, oh, I was somewhere else.
Yeah.
But what you're doing is you're pinpointing that and intentionally saying, let's go to that place.
Exactly. And and the way that you said that is a very precise way to say it. Let's go to that place. It's not I'm going to hypnotize you.
Mm.
It's more of a, I'm going to guide you into hypnotizing yourself or getting yourself into trance, because there isn't, one of the common misconceptions, and this comes from like movies and TVs of like, ooh, like almost
Mhm.
like this voodoo feeling of I'm going to
Yeah.
point my fingers at you or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're just going to zonk out.
Mm.
It's the folks that come up on my stage are taking themselves there. I'm nothing more than a guide that knows with a fairly high probability of success. And not everybody that comes up on my stage gets where they need to be. I'd say probably about 80% of the people do, and a handful of people every show get sent back down because they just don't get there. It's there, you kind of got to be able to relax and let go.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, some people have a problem with that. Uh, so, those who can and can just kind of let go and follow along and have the ability to imagine the path that I'm walking them through, soon get to that point where they're in my world on autopilot, reacting to whatever it is, whatever picture that I'm painting in front of them.
Mm. Yeah. I think those like preconceptions and misgivings people have about hypnotism, I get the feeling some of that is fading into the past now. And that people are viewing it in a new light. I mean, there'll always be charlatans and hucksters in any profession, right? So you'll still get, the fake psychic people or
Oh, for sure.
people who are cheating and all of that. But I think in general, people have started to understand it in a different way. Do you feel that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I see it, there seem to be, I mean, some of the misconception is pushed through things like movies and television.
Yeah.
There was a movie that came out, I want to say 20 or so years ago, called Office Space.
Oh yeah, I've seen that. The comedy,
And
right?
and yes, and one of the key premises of it is that the main character ends up going to a hypnotherapist who has a heart attack and dies in the middle of the session
Yeah.
and doesn't, quote, wake the guy up.
Yeah.
And he leaves that session, and the movie would have you think that he is still in this hypnotic trance.
Mm.
When in reality, if we were to recreate that setting in real life, the one of two things is going to happen. Either the guy who has the heart attack falling over is going to startle and wake up
Mm.
the hypnosis patient, or enough time is going to go by that they're naturally going to emerge from that trance.
Mm.
But the things like that created this fear that somebody could get stuck in hypnosis.
Yeah.
And if you were to go in all the way in the other direction, polar opposite to it, some will argue in kind of a sense of watching the movie The Matrix and that series of movies, that we're all constantly stuck in some form of hypnosis, and
Yeah.
that we're all part of some machine that's running around, not necessarily in that I'm plugged in
Right, right, right.
biometrically to something, but that I am part of this machine, that none of us can see the wheels turning around us, and that we're kind of pawns in this game and whatnot,
Yeah.
which is also a little bit extreme, I think, or I hope. Uh, um, so but it's a naturally occurring phenomena that is completely safe. When I did my initial training on how to do this, we spent the better part of a day and a half at the very beginning focusing almost entirely on safety and ethics of, how to do this, how not to do this, little things about keeping people safe on stage,
Yeah.
adapting to, because again, when I was in Barcelona, I did 4 total shows, 3 hypnosis shows on 4 different stages. So that was normal. I did 3 shows this past week, 2 for high schools at high schools, and you show up and there no 2 venues, no 2 theaters are created the same. So even when you are in a theater with more of the bells and whistles than you would get from, let's say, a comedy club or a microbrewery that happens to have a performance area or wherever you might be, it's still okay. How do I do this show here? You know, this stage has a big gap between the edge of the stage and where the seating starts. This stage is 6 feet in the air. I need to make sure that I'm setting my chair so that there is no remote chance that anybody that I have up here on this stage gets anywhere near that 6-foot drop off or whatever it is. So it's unique every time, unless you're in a situation where it's like, hey, I have a show here 5 nights a week, every week. Okay, you're working on one stage.
Right.
Now and learn the nuances of that room, but
Yeah.
you still have to do certain things to be safe in that environment.
Yeah, but that's the craft part of it, isn't it? There's craft and there's art, right? And it's like
Yeah.
a lot of the time they won't even sort of be aware that you are, always checking on those things and keeping the show running at the same time, keeping the audience entertained, but also making sure all the exits are covered, everything's clean, no one's veering too far one way or another, physically or emotionally or whatever that is. Something you said there really interested me. I just want to ask your opinion on it. Why do you think it is that people can be hypnotized?
Why can they?
Yeah. So I was thinking, it's something you mentioned. I can't exactly remember what you said, but I was just thinking, what is the, I don't know, evolutionary reason or like psychological? And I know some people are sort of resistant to it. I myself have actually had hypnotherapy for insomnia many years ago. Um, but why do you think that's a possibility for a human to be hypnotized?
Um, I think that I'm gonna do my best to address this, but you're asking me a creator level question,
Yeah.
so it's quite a bit above my pay grade. Whatever your belief system is, I think it is something that is answered at a much higher level. Um, but I think that what I see is that and I'm kind of gonna address this question almost in the reverse of it, that we exist in this world that is filled with so much noise. And I don't necessarily mean audible noise.
Mm,
Audible noise is part of it, but we are in a ding, ding, ding alert on our phones and other devices, and a social media feed, and really like 6 social media feeds, and everything, all of this different stimulus that's coming from us in all different directions. We have family members, we have workmates, we have schoolmates if you're in school or whatever it is, and all of this stuff that's flying at us in all these different directions. But if we were to go back in time,
mm,
you know, prehistoric cave dwelling man and woman, there is no noise,
mm.
not the way that it is today. There are no gadgets, there
Right.
are no devices. It is
No
simply
24-hour news cycle. Yeah.
wake up and exist and
Yeah.
survive and hunter and gatherer. And I believe that as beings, we are installed with that self-correcting through our subconscious mind sense,
Mm,
the ability to get ourselves back on track, to not get way out in this direction or that direction, or addicted to this, that, or the other. And the natural ability that the mind and the body have to perform those self-diagnostic and self-correcting tasks have perpetually gotten more and more convoluted
mm,
over time because of all of the noise. So the ability to do that, I think today represents an isolated way in which somebody can cut through that noise and open that door back up, in a clinical setting, to that almost self-correcting, self-regulating, self-calibrating existence.
Right.
And it's quite frankly a playful sandbox that we can, for lack of a better word, take advantage of in the entertainment sense. It opens the door really to creativity and expression and that exploration, because if you were to go, and I highly recommend this, and this is not me shilling any of my particular shows, I'm going to make this same statement applying across the world to other performing hypnotists, because I thoroughly believe that anybody that's doing this is doing their version of the same thing. Don't go to one of these shows by yourself. I mean, you can, that's fine. But what you really want to do to fulfill this experience entirely is go with a group of people, whether they're family, friends, workmates, some grouping
A posse.
of people that know each other. Because inevitably one of those folks, and it might be you, are going to want to go up on that stage and volunteer in the show. And for everybody that is there watching you, knowing you, they've known you for years, they know what your demeanor is and how you react in certain situations, and what you or those people that are out in the audience are going to experience is seeing a light switch just flick. And that person is no longer the person that you've known them to be. You will see that hypnotist on stage unlock some of their potentially deeply hidden personality. And I mean, it's their personality that has been kind of suppressed with everything that's going on all day, and all of this noise piling up, and all this responsibility, and the need to guard oneself. If you're a professional and you're in the public and you need to act a certain way, none of that matters when you're on stage and when you're in trance, and it becomes very natural, and people can become incredibly expressive, and you literally see a different look on that person's face. And you're not necessarily, if that person up on stage is a stranger, from some other part of the room that you didn't come with, you're going to see that, but you're not going to have who is this person normally day to day to kind of in your mind compare that to. So it's a very, very unique and interesting revelation to see somebody that you know well experiencing this, because there is that like, oh, something's a little different right now. And you can see it on people. So I highly recommend that when you're doing something like this, going to one of these shows, even if you're like, I want to see it, but I don't want to do it, that's fine. A lot of people feel that way initially. I've had people that have talked to me before the show saying, I have no interest in being hypnotized. Okay, great. Enjoy the show. It's still fun from out there. And then when I get to talking briefly in the beginning of the show about what it is and what it isn't, and I call for volunteers, and I look over and I'm like, that person that said they didn't want to do this is sitting on my stage. What's going on right now? Something in that explanation. I've dispelled some myth that satisfied them, or said something that intrigued them to the point where they ran up on my stage. I'm like, okay, cool. Here we go. Let's do this. A lot of times those people are the best people in the show. And it's a really unique thing. And a ton of fun, even if you're just sitting back and watching. But and those people wake up, they're refreshed, they're energized, they kind of just imagine this just emotional wash that just resets you. Because even in that silly fun stage setting, some of that almost kind of self-aligning, self-correcting benefit, even though I'm not taking anybody in any sort of clinical direction while on stage for one of these stage shows, you get that, some degree of that benefit just from experiencing it and going there, because your subconscious mind is going to start assessing, and it's going to have less noise getting in the way of it. And, it may, unbeknownst to you and certainly unbeknownst to me, start kind of tweaking and fixing some things inside of you without even knowing it.
Mm, interesting. Yeah. So it's kind of you're getting to the heart of the Homo sapien underneath the human that we use as our mask or
Yeah.
various masks. But essentially, we're not that far removed from the hunter-gatherer, so that stuff is still like the blueprint.
Yeah. I mean, it's all still there. It's just buried all under a whole lot of, let's say, technological evolution.
Mhm.
Um, they didn't have stuff like these phones and devices or Zoom calls or schedules for that matter. Their schedule was when the damn sun came up and when the sun went down. And, we can do the things that we can do when the sun is up, and we do other things when the sun's down. And there we go. That's the schedule.
Yeah,
Um,
sounds all right, doesn't it?
there are definitely times where that can be more desirable than all the commotion that is life.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you tell me a bit about like your backstory? Because I'm interested how people arrive to becoming, a mentalist, a hypnotist, all the rest of it. Where are you from? How did that inform where you arrived at, where you were like, you know what, I want to learn how to do this, and then sign up for a course or whatever it is you did?
So I don't have a direct story to this. A lot of people that do this come at it from really one of two ways, and I'm not in either of those camps. Like if they got started in the clinical and hypnotherapy side of things first,
Mm,
um, a lot of times that started by them seeking help first,
right,
realizing how powerful this was, and then that kind of curiosity and having that natural desire to help others will end up pushing them into learning in that profession.
right.
And then you have a lot of times the entertainment people that start as magicians and mind readers or whatever it is, and those stories almost inevitably start with the I got a magic kit when I was 6 or when I was 8 and it just took off from there, or I had a magician at my 5th birthday party and I was enthralled or whatever. I started doing mentalism, but I did not get into that until I was an adult. I didn't have a magic kit when I was a kid. I didn't see, I didn't have a birthday party with a magician that made me want to do that when I grow up. Um, I always had a curiosity. I always had an interest in it. There would be TV shows that I would watch, like back in the either late 90s or early 2000s on the Sci-Fi channel here in the States. Penn and Teller
Mm,
had this TV show. It was almost like a reality game show before reality TV was a big deal and a thing, like a competition type of show. This show was called hang on, let me think, because I was not planning on the conversation going in this direction. Wizard Wars. It was called Wizard Wars, and I think it only had like 1 or 2 seasons.
mhm,
And the premise of this show were that Penn and Teller and a handful of other magic connected people were the judges of this show. And they had these 4 or 5 magicians that were, well known within the magic community that they called the wizards. And there would be 4 magicians that were put into this episode, each episode, and they would be paired off with another magician that maybe they've never worked with.
mm,
And as far as like the outlay of the show, production side, I'm sure there was a whole lot going on that you never see. But the premise of the show is okay, these 2 pairs of magicians who maybe barely know each other go off into the warehouse, and you must create a 10-minute routine, and you have to use, and there would be random objects of
right,
like You have to use dog biscuits and a leaf blower and a balloon
Hmm.
and create a magic routine that somehow, a 10-minute magic routine or whatever the time frame was that incorporates those. So that you would see them kind of working in the background, and then they would come and they would do the shows or the little presentations, and then Penn and Teller and the other judges would be like, okay, this one was the best, you're moving on.
Right.
And then they would select two of the wizards, which were, a rotating cast of maybe 5 or 6 magicians, four of which would be on each of these shows. So you kind of got to know them over the series. They would pick two that they were then going to compete against, and they would go do the same thing. So that was one of the earliest things, that, and then Harry Anderson on Night Court, who was a judge who was also a magician that would do magic tricks, were like two of the things that I remember earliest about like stoking the fire of my interest in mystery arts performance. Um, and it was a trip to Vegas, maybe, let's see what years, almost 10 years ago now, that my wife and I went to see Penn and Teller.
Mm.
And then we went to a magic shop, and it was just, I decided to buy a couple of things and played around with them and whatever, but that slowly evolved into me starting to learn more and more and kind of finding myself in this, um, in this mind reader mentalism character. And I was doing shows and I was opening for bigger performers and in a wide variety of things. But for whatever reason, I don't even know where it started or what was the first instance in which I witnessed some TV version of hypnosis, but I always had this interest in hypnotism. And it was a matter of, how do I learn how to do this? And it's not the kind of thing where it's like, well, I'm just going to go to the hypnosis shop and buy a couple of DVDs and learn this. Like, there's a magic shop in certain cities and all over the place, but there's not a hypnosis shop. There's not, series of DVDs and otherwise. And I'm the kind of person that likes to learn immersively and by doing. So when I finally found the opportunity with a longtime headliner in Las Vegas who was doing a course teaching stage hypnosis, I was like, okay, what is this? Is this legit? I called a colleague of mine who is very, very well connected in the magic community to say, hey, is this guy legit? Because I know that that hypnosis, I was fairly confident that at the time, no experience, but confident at the time that hypnosis is real. But there are also people out there that are doing BS shows where they're basically cueing people to do stuff. And it's I'm like, I don't want the hooey, okay? Because I could just make that shit up on the fly. I want to learn how to do this.
Yeah.
And I have an interest in the clinical side of things, although what I'm seeking is the performative side of things. So I was convinced so it was fortunate the guy that I reached out to actually knew the person running I mean, it's a big city, but it's also a very small community. So connected me with him ahead of time, assured me that he was legit. I think the first phone call I spent with him was probably a good hour and a half, grilling him on all of these things and these concerns. And, after that, I was convinced, signed up for the course. And it was great because he prepared me to do these shows that within a month I was on stage doing my first show.
Wow.
And when I did that first show, I really enjoyed doing mentalism, but I fell in love with it so hard to the point where I'm like, I don't know that I ever want to do another mentalism show again.
Huh.
And then, I had bookings, some of which I could convince people, hey, would you rather me do a hypnosis show? And they're like, oh, that sounds great. Some of them were like, nope, we want what we hired you for. Okay, great. But once I finished that series of things that were already booked before I learned to do hypnosis, I went through several years of only doing hypnosis shows. And I didn't do another mentalism routine until I was asked to come and perform at a hypnosis conference of all places. But they wanted me to do a mentalism show. I'm like, are you sure? Because you usually have a hypnotist. Yeah, we want to shift gears and do something a little different this year. And oh, okay, sounds good to me.
Mm.
Which was cool because I had not, at that point in time, I had not done a full hypnosis show in well over 2 years. And getting back on that bike, so to speak,
Mm.
but then being able to see it in a different perspective of I'm not going to do what I used to do and how I used to do it. I've got a room full of people, a third of which I know. And I know things about these people. And I know some of their history and I know some of what makes them tick. I have the ability here to put together a show that is uniquely for this group of people.
Mm.
There can be inside jokes that wouldn't fly in a normal public audience
Mm.
because it would make no sense to them.
Hmm.
There are things that happened in the hypnosis show performance by a different performer the year before that I can call back to in my show that I wouldn't be able to call back to in any other room than this one. I wouldn't even be able to do this at a different hypnosis conference,
Mm.
just this one, because it's a regional conference that draws in a lot of the same people, and just it was such a eye-opening experience for me. And I had so much fun doing it I get to do this thing that is on such a different level than I've ever done it before because there's something for me to say, for you to contact me and say, hey, I've got this company, we're doing a holiday party, and me to sit here and grill you and interview you about the 200 employees that might show up there.
Right.
And I can craft a show that is tailored to your company, to your group, but that's still several steps away from like knowing you and interacting with you and really it's such a different layer and a different level to be like, I know those two people are going to be here and I can do a routine with that couple that the final reveal is a tarot card of the lovers that has their picture illustrated on it.
Right.
I can't just randomly do that anywhere. Like, and it takes some planning. Like if they had asked me 3 weeks ahead of time, hey, can you do this show? It wouldn't have been the show that I did. I was asked several months ahead of time and I'm like, oh, I get to do all sorts of cool stuff here. So it really kind of opened my mind back up and was part of there was a good period of time where actually earlier when we first started the podcast, I was talking about the difference between, some people want to say they're a stage hypnotist. Some people want to say they're a comedy hypnotist. I don't care. I'm an entertainer.
Mm.
But there was a period of time in which I was in that bubble of I am this. And that, a lot of this past performance in that conference kind of really opened that door back up to be like, no, you're just an entertainer.
Right.
The vehicle that you use most of the time is hypnosis. But it doesn't matter. I could do all sorts of stuff in all sorts of different settings.
Mm.
And it's a ton of fun. And it's really kind of allowed me to take yet another step in the ability to just be like, almost kind of have this mentality that there are no rules. We're going to do whatever feels right in this room, in this moment for these people. And some of that you're learning on the fly, especially in a hypnosis show, because you're starting to get to know who these folks on your stage are, what they react to, where their hot buttons are, and kind of thinking on the fly of, okay, how do we make this experience a little bit, more elevated than the next because of who I have on stage in this moment.
Mm. And for those who don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but mentalism is a type of magic where it's like, quote unquote mind reading. It's like you're
Right.
thinking of this number or this name and
Yeah, that is the most efficient way to describe how mentalism presents is some version of a mind reading act. And sometimes it's you're going to write something down on the other side of the room and I'm going to you know,
Yeah.
tell you what you've written down, or you're going to ask a question
Yeah.
and you're going to put it in a bin, and so is everybody else. And I'm going to pull one of these out of the bin, and I'm not even going to open it, and I'm going to be able to answer the question and direct that answer toward you somehow.
Right.
Or you're going to flip through a book and you're going to pick a sentence that's in that book, and I'm going to take that story that you've started to read part of a step further.
Yeah.
And, from tens of meters away. I'm not standing beside you looking over your shoulder or anything like that. Like you're across the room type of thing.
But that is a form of magic. I think we can both agree.
Correct. Yeah.
But hypnotism sort of is magic adjacent, right?
It gets lumped a lot of times into a similar category for sure. But it's a weird shift in gears. And I really enjoyed this when I started doing it, because there's a lot of lying or almost lying, depending on how one chooses to present themselves in a magic or mentalism setting. Because you don't have secret superpowers. You can't actually read that thing. There's a trick that's happening.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you A, but B is what's really happening.
Right.
And to shift gears to the point where I'm going to describe to you what's going to happen on stage. And everything that I'm telling you, to the best of my understanding, is what's actually happening
in their mind.
Yeah. Well, and just if I tell you that I'm going to bring people up here and these are settings in which you
right.
may have experienced this phenomena.
Yeah.
I'm not deceiving you.
I'm not holding anything back. This is just.
I am not misdirecting you.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you what's going to happen and what you're seeing and what you're doing. And it was just a weird, like almost refreshing sense of, I never lost sleep over the tricks.
Right. Because
I knew that my job.
People are there to watch those things. But...
Correct. And I knew that my job was to entertain you or your group, not to read your mind. It just looked like I was reading your mind.
Right.
And you mentioned earlier charlatans. I think that the intent and where people take it is the big kind of difference maker here. It's that person that wants to, if I'm going to entertain you and tell you that I'm a psychic medium, but it's kind of, that this is entertainment, great. If I buy a ticket to go see Romeo and Juliet, I know that they didn't just kill themselves. Okay? I get it, but I'm still entertained.
Right.
If that is your sort of thing that you find entertaining. It's when that person that was doing the performance gets approached by somebody in the audience and says, "Hey, can you help me connect with so-and-so who's been dead for 5 years?" And then that person says, "Yeah, write me a check, give me a bunch of money, and I'll help you connect with that person." That's where, in my opinion, it goes too far. When you start taking advantage of people and it stops becoming entertainment and you're basically exploiting them, you've gone too far. If it stays purely entertainment, you're going to pay, $20, $30, $50 or whatever for the ticket, sometimes even more depending on who the performer is. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Because just like going to a movie or a play or a band or whatever, you pay, and it's, I assume that when you recently saw Radiohead, you paid quite a bit of money for those tickets, as compared to if you were to just go see a local band in a pub somewhere, you're not going to pay so much for that.
Right.
So everybody's got a different price. I don't think that the price itself is the factor, but it's I'm going to do something that I'm telling you is something else, and you're going to pay me money independently, where it kind of gets a little dodgy to me.
Yeah, for sure. Did you ever watch the Darren Brown show, Faith Healer? It's making me think of that. Really interesting. He's a British magician. You probably know about him,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
uh, he does this mentalism show, and it's kind of, is it the Falwells, those mega church people who were running a scam where she was like taking notes and then feeding it to him in a headset on stage?
Oh gosh, who is that? Let me I'm gonna throw out a reference to a podcast that your listeners, if they're interested in that topic,
Mm,
should be interested in. And the podcast is called The World's Greatest Con.
mm,
And that whole thing gets broken down in a season called Project Alpha.
mm,
And Project Alpha, I think, happened in the 70s in the States, where they took a few people who had quote unquote psychic powers and isolated them in a room in, like these lab type of conditions, and had them, and these guys basically tricked them into thinking that they were actually psychic. And they knew that I mean, they did this on
oh,
purpose because the science was not science.
mm,
It was clear and apparent from anybody connected to this project that they were trying to prove that psychic powers were real,
right.
not trying to determine the truth. So the scientific method was off. And when the scientific method is off, then it can be manipulated.
Mm,
And part of what they did was, these same folks were part of blowing up the spot of whatever that mega church is.
yeah.
And it's mentioned in there. One of the performers that was part of that, who was also part of dispelling that mega church, is a gentleman named Banachek.
Yeah.
He's a mentalist who tours the world. He had a Vegas residency. I think he's doing a bunch of cruise ships now. He and I actually had shows, different venues, but at the same time last year or the year before, at the Rochester, New York Fringe Festival. He's a big part of, and he's interviewed in that podcast, The World's Greatest Con, the Project Alpha thing. That podcast has got a ton of stuff. I mean, if you're interested in, there was a British guy years ago who cheated on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Yeah.
There's a different season. I think it's the second season where they go through that guy's story. There was a game show back in the 50s maybe that was rigged.
Oh, yeah. I think
They
I've.
talk about that. There was a movie about it too, but they go into a deep dive with that. There was a game show in the States about called Pressure Luck,
Mm,
that had like this, and they've actually re-brought this show out, but some guy figured out the pattern of the lights,
mm.
and basically he didn't cheat because he was just taking advantage of an exploit that he
Yeah.
observed.
Right.
But
It's like counting cards.
they do a deep dive into that. I mean, who would have thought that I was coming on a podcast and would end up plugging somebody totally different podcast? But it's absolutely 100% worth checking out, especially for anybody that's interested in the Project Alpha stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
That sounds really great. I'll definitely check that out.
yeah,
The reason why what you're saying made me think of it is because in Darren Brown's show, he does what you were saying you do. At the beginning, he's like, listen, I'm not a faith healer. Okay. I don't have some divine power. What I'm going to do is a routine in the character of a faith healer. And you are going to feel the effects that people who do believe, that do go to faith healing shows, feel.
yeah,
But I'm just telling you up top, that is not what I'm doing. It's a trick. So
yeah.
he's very honest with it. And then he goes through routines. And then people have these extraordinary reactions, from, the sublime to the ridiculous and everywhere in between. And it comes back to what you're saying about like telling the truth, and the difference between that and charlatans. It's like, you can just tell people the truth. You don't have to sell them the lie at the beginning.
And
And
some of them aren't going to believe you and still think that you're performing miracles.
Yeah, exactly. Some would be like, no, I know you really do have a hotline to the Lord. Absolutely. And some people are not going to believe you if you're the other way, and there's all shades in between. I think that's really interesting. Um, because yeah, maybe a reminder that we can be more honest. And I don't know. Do you know where I'm going with it? I don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's when it's a problem and when somebody is unethical about it, then it's a problem. But I think that, there is a bigger movement in the community for most. There's still some exceptions. There's some folks that are out there still gallivanting around as if they've got real powers.
Yeah.
But most will tell you that, like one of the things I mentioned Banachek
Yeah.
in the stage shows that I've seen him perform in the past 5 or 6 years, part of his introduction is explaining that, I'm blending the 5 senses that you have
Mm,
to give the impression, I'm utilizing many things that exist within your 5 senses to give the impression of a sixth sense. There is no actual sixth sense, but because of the way that I'm utilizing the 5 that you do have,
mm.
it projects and presents as if there is a
Right.
sixth.
Yeah.
So he's very upfront about it, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like, listen, it's an illusion. And some we know why some of it works, but also some of it is even mysterious to the craftsman, because it acts upon our subconscious, and we still have lots to learn about that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's fascinating. Um, what did I want to ask you? Something else just came to my mind as we were talking there. Um, oh, yes, I remember now. Um, has there ever been a show that you've done where someone has come up to you afterwards and told you something that completely changed your perspective on the show that you've just had?
That's a good question. I don't know that it's exactly happened in that way, but I will tell you that my perspective of what I do has certainly evolved in years of doing it.
Mm,
When I first started and first fell in love with it, I thought, this is so cool. Every time I go on stage, I'm doing 2 shows at the exact same time. I'm doing the show for my folks up here on stage, and then I'm doing the show for the folks out in the audience.
mm,
And there were a few instances, and some of it happened through conversations with volunteers, and some of it happened through reviewing video of shows to realize that I'm not doing 2 different shows.
mm,
If I've got 8 people up on stage, I'm doing 9 different shows.
mm.
If I've got 10 people up on stage, I'm doing 11 different shows because each and every one of these people on stage is having a unique and personal experience to them. And one of the first places that it really like the light bulb hit is in some of my shows. Especially early on, I would have this closing routine where people would be um showgirls, like stage dancers.
Right.
And that word showgirls can mean different things to different people. And I had 3 or 4 people on my stage one time in the middle of this showgirls routine who link their arms side by side and start doing this rocket style kick line.
Like the
And
can
I'm
can.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
I never told anybody to do that. But somehow to that grouping of people, this is what that means.
Yeah.
And then they started doing that. And it's really where the light bulb went off because not everybody did it.
Right.
There were, 3 or 4 other people on stage that were doing whatever they were doing, dancing like they were strippers or whatever.
Yeah.
and kind of everywhere in between. So seeing how that kind of emerged and was almost like a curveball from the exact same suggestion that I had given before in other shows, but a different result
Mm.
because who I have on stage, that means something different to them.
Yeah, it's the organic part of the process, isn't it? It's just like they all,
Like if I were to do this show in Scotland, for example,
yeah.
and tell my volunteers to sit on their fanny, that's going to look really weird because to them that means something different. And I don't say
Yeah.
that here in the States, but it's a great example of something that means something totally different depending on who you are and what your life's experiences are.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that would look like, somebody trying to do that in Scotland. So that's an extreme example of two words that mean different things in different regions, but it's not even just it's so much more just you know I everywhere there's words that mean different things to different people.
Yeah.
We have people that drink Coke, some that drink soda, some that drink pop.
Yeah.
um in public you get your water from a bubbler. We don't. We have water fountains. Like so if you imagine that and just the subtle different things that, what is this to you?
Mm.
And if you have 8 random people that don't know each other, the answer to that question for something that seems relatively simple might be totally different.
Mm.
Even down to the point where if I were to say, "Hey, do you want to go fishing?" Some people imagine themselves sitting on the side of a pond in a
Mm.
very quiet setting. Some people imagine themselves with huge rods in the deep sea trying to get marlins and everywhere in between. So even something like that, because of who that person is that you're having the conversation with, you know, fishing, something as simple as fishing can
Yeah.
be totally different to different people.
I mean, I didn't even imagine either of those two scenarios. I pictured myself like on a bridge and there was like a stream river underneath. So,
Well,
yeah.
there you go. A whole nother example of one simple concept
Yeah.
meaning something different because the setting is different. So
Mm.
if you were in trance and I took you fishing, you'd probably be standing on a bridge.
Mm. I wonder why that is. I've never even been fishing. I've been crabbing, but I want to go fishing now. Been on my to-do list for a while. I've never managed to do it. Have you ever been fishing?
um, some here and there, a bit as a kid,
Yeah.
not a lot.
No. Never caught a whopper. Is there a picture of
No,
something like
no,
this?
tiny little things would have been the most that I had ever caught.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting. Yeah, the different reactions people have, the different words. And a lot of it, again, coming back to that idea of we don't even know why. Like, I have no idea why I imagine the bridge. I have no idea. And those people probably don't know why they linked up as a foursome. It
Right,
just, it just is cosmic. There's a certain mysterious element to it. There's an energy that people can pick up on. And
for
especially
sure.
if their guard is down as well, then they're more open to that idea. And that comes back to, I think, what you were saying about the improv element of it, that yes and feeling that in good improv can lead to crazy outcomes.
Yeah.
That's and that's where comedy comes in, isn't it? Because if you funnel them down certain pipelines, yeah, it can mean like quite a few different things, but at the end of either of those few options, there'll be something funny. There'll be, and that's
Yeah, and you've got it's a playground to be able to create a twist and a turn. I used to do early on, I used to do a routine where I would put people in a boat and I would have them row out into the middle of a body of water and then they'd go fishing and then they'd struggle with this fish and some of the stuff that I was talking about. And then that evolved into, hey, let's add another phase where they're no longer fishing and now they are the fish. I didn't always do it that way. That was just a different, okay, great, because it's kind of funny to see people wiggling around on stage as if they're trying to break out of a hook. And, so I think that there's always kind of a way to take something a little bit further without going way off the deep end and saying, hey, can we get a little more out of this? Can we take it a different direction? Um, which is fun because I could end up doing, a series of kind of the base routines, but take them in different directions. One of the popular kind of it manifests in a lot of different stage hypnosis shows is people becoming bodybuilders. Well, there's all sorts of different directions you could take that in. Um, the guy that taught me to do this will do that routine and then come back later in the show and have people coming up with and telling the audience what their wrestling name or their bodybuilder name is, and he gets all this ridiculous shit, and it seems to like escalate. All it takes is one person
Mm.
in that room to say something ridiculous, and then each subsequent person seems to escalate and be more and more ridiculous.
Mm.
And it just, or I've seen other people take that routine to you're now, pumping iron and showing everybody off how you got those muscles, and now you're lifting those weights with your legs and just doing all sorts of other where can we take this in a wacky zany way that's not completely straightforward? What sort of twists and turns can we introduce into this setting to just elevate it and make it silly? And again, we're never punching down on anybody. We're never doing anything that's making fun of or belittling anybody. It's just, fun, silly shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the best way to approach work, I think. If you can, if that is an option to you in that moment, it's the best one to take, I believe.
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, your love of the craft shines through in everything that you say, and it's really enjoyable just listening to you like wax poetic about the work and the ideas underneath it. So I just want to say thank you so much for sharing with me.
Yeah. No, I love talking about it. I wish more people knew about it. I highly encourage wherever you are in the world listening to this, and I know that you've got reach that's all over the place. Check one of these out. There are great performers doing this all over the world. If you're in Europe and there's not somebody near you, reach out to me because I am starting to try to put together something later this year. And would love new leads on new cities that might have kind of an English speaking, really the what we're looking for now, and we're open to whatever works, but the niche seems to slide right into like an English speaking comedy scene. There are some restrictions with the venues because I can't do it on like a tiny little some of the stages have like a little platform that is great for one or two performers to be on. I need more room than that, but certainly not a huge proper stage with all the bells and whistles. But yeah, I mean, I love to just take this and share the fun times with whatever audiences I can get in front of because it's a ton of fun.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, you've been bitten by the Europe bug, so it's in the future for you. I could tell.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Judge. And hopefully we talk again.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks for listening to the show. If you've enjoyed it, please give us 5 stars and consider becoming a subscriber and maybe even supporting us on Patreon. It really, really, really helps me continue making this show. If you haven't enjoyed it, then you can fuck off. Many, many thanks to Nils Hennis Steer for the amazing music and to Dave Fox for the cool artwork. Please keep coming back every week for more bliss of the abyss.